Hey everybody, thank you so much for clicking on this video. So as many of you know, I am a NASM certified nutrition coach. So I deal with clients a lot one-on-one on building healthy, sustainable long-term habits to get them better nutritional choices throughout their day-to-day life, as well as work on long-term goals. And you'll hear me talk about often that my scope of practice is rather small. And that's because my training is rather small. I take staying in my lane very, very seriously. So that's why you'll actually see me referring people out to registered dietitians a lot of times in the comments of my videos. But then I tend to get the question, what is the difference? So today, we're gonna talk about just that. We're also gonna go through some of the most common things that I work on with my one-on-one nutrition clients, as well as sit down with a registered dietitian in this video, and we're actually gonna answer some questions that you submitted to me on Instagram. So stay tuned for all that fun stuff. Let's go. So let's talk about what a nutrition coach is first. Very simply, a nutrition coach is someone who helps people build habits toward long-term sustainable goals in terms of their nutritional choices. Now, to become a nutrition coach, you typically just have to take one course. So that's exactly what I did. I took one online course. It took me like 6 months to get through, and here I am today. Doesn't mean that I'm not continually learning other things, but you really don't need that much education. But speaking of learning other things, I want to talk about this other thing. I almost said sponsor. They're not sponsoring this video, but it is pretty cool. Go to future Justina. Hello from the future. Okay, so this is very exciting because I actually just got sent my precision nutrition textbooks. Like I said in this video, I am already a NASM certified nutrition coach, but Precision Nutrition reached out to me and they wanted to partner together. So they offered to send me their textbooks and their course, which is available online digitally, to take on my own and just kind of like document my experience and my thoughts as we go. So you're gonna hear a lot more about the PN1 certification, and I'm very excited. Okay, now let's talk about what a registered dietitian is. A registered dietitian, or an RD, is an expert in nutrition. And you can find them in a large variety of settings. You can find them in the corporate world, in the clinical world, in school settings, in outpatient, solo practice. There's a lot of different places that you will see them. And basically all of the things that they are capable of dealing with are the things that are outside of my scope of practice. So things like gut issues, hormonal imbalances, autoimmune diseases, meal plannings very specifically for people, that's all going to be falling under the umbrella of an RD. And the reason for that is because they have a lot more education than I do. So the minimum required education for an RD is at least a bachelor's degree. You have to have 6 to 12 months of observation at an accredited facility, and then you have to pass a national exam through the Commission on Dietetic Registration. I hope I said that right. So as you can see, it's a lot more work, time, experience, education than I have. So that being said, let's kind of dive in. I'm just gonna give you a really brief breakdown of like what it looks like to intake a client on my end and then continue to work with the client as far as nutrition goes. So first step, when you wanna work with me, you're gonna go to the Work With Me section. You're gonna scroll down and you're gonna apply for nutrition coaching. So, side note, I actually completely made it through my wait list, so I'm gonna be taking on new clients soon. So if you want nutrition coaching after you see like what this is and what I actually have to offer, do this. So basically you're gonna go down, you're just gonna fill out these 3 questions, hit submit, and then when there's an opening, I reach out to schedule a session. I'm gonna send you this intake form. Now there's no obligation to work with me when you fill this out. This is just so that when we have our free virtual consultation, we can just make sure that like I understand exactly what you're looking for and that it's a good fit together. So the main thing we're gonna focus on during that intake call is just that we're on the same page, right? So I'm gonna start with your goals and your obstacles. I'm gonna make sure that I can reiterate them in my own words so that I truly understand what you're looking for. I always make sure that with each goal, I provide one actionable step that we would do together just to continue to give people examples of what it would look like working together. And then after that, I always just like to ask people to give me like a very typical day of eating, take me through a breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack situation. This not only gives me a better picture of what their daily habits are, but also how they talk about food. So I'm starting to screen for any like disordered eating, different hunger cues that they might be experiencing, or just overall like how do they feel about food. And then from there, each client is gonna get their own individual private portal, which is really just a fancy word for Google Drive folder. I'm not gonna show you a client's obviously because that's all confidential information, but these are just some of the most common things that you see in there. So this is gonna be someone's goals. I fill out those first goals from our intake call, and then we kind of expand on them, build them out into SMART goals. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So really just making sure that whatever this goal is, it is something very specific to you and something that we can measure along the way. For some people, we do our intake numbers. Most people, their first week of homework before our first session is just to keep a food diary so I can see a real week of eating. And then we get into like the fun documents too. Like we've got some, I don't know, what's a good one? This is one you see a lot with people. For some reason, I have a lot of vegetarian clients, but this is just gonna be like different food groups that you see that you can add some protein in on. I don't wanna give too many of my personalized things away. Those are just like the types of things that you would see within your personalized folder. So I went on Instagram and I asked you, what would you want to ask an RD? Because so many times when I post a ask me a nutrition question on Instagram, I say it's outside of my scope of practice. So today was the day that you get your answers. Now, I did select just the top questions that I thought would apply to the most amount of people without also making this a 45-minute sit-down video. But luckily for you, the RD that I am sitting down with is someone that has a wealth of information that you can also follow. So today we're chatting with Katie Horrell. Katie is a registered dietitian and certified personal trainer who focuses in mindful and intuitive eating, and she is based out of Colorado, which is actually like my favorite state. And we decided to sit down on Zoom to tackle some of these questions. Please remember, if she did not get to your question today, she has probably answered it on her channel at some point, or she will tackle it in the future. So definitely go follow her on Instagram and YouTube if you haven't already, but let's get on into this Q&A.
So, Katie, the first and biggest question that we got was how to know if and when you should see a dietitian.
Yeah, this is such a great question. And honestly, I think there's no like perfect time to know when you need to see a dietitian. I think it's kind of like seeing a therapist in a way. Like everyone could probably benefit from a dietitian, but the biggest thing that comes to mind for me is if you've been struggling with some sort of nutrition issue that keeps reoccurring, whether it's diabetes or maybe getting your blood pressure under control, or even if it's just regular old behavior change and you just want to make better food choices or want some guidance, I think that's the perfect time to see a registered dietitian.
Let's talk about, because I know this is something that you really specialize in, intuitive eating. But the specific question I want to send over to your way was how to balance intuitive eating with also having some sort of like plan or guide. Like how do you balance having a plan but also being intuitive?
Yeah, I think this is a great question because especially in like our line of work, working with athletes or people who are really active, you kind of want and need some sort of structure because it would be almost irresponsible to say like, oh, well, just eat whatever the heck you want and you'll be fine, because you and I both know that when you're exercising and moving your body all the time, you actually do need a certain level of, guidance. So what I would say is if you found a guide or a plan that you already kind of like, meshed with, or you like, or you enjoy, and the recipes really fit your style, I think that's great. My thing that I would like to keep in mind or like to share is just that it's important to listen to your body when it comes to amounts of food. And when you're looking at these guidelines, are you being flexible with them? So I know the whole point of guidelines is to have like rules, but I think when we get too rigid and too structured with it, it goes against our intuition. So it's not really intuitive eating if we're not also listening to our bodies. So the biggest thing that I can say is it's fine to go follow recipes and nutrition guides and stuff like that. But say the guide says to have soup for dinner and you're really needing those carbs after a long workout. Be okay with being flexible and being like, yeah, I'm going to have this soup on the meal plan, but I'm also going to add to it so I can really fuel my body properly. That's the biggest thing.
This is another one that kind of goes with like, having a plan and guide, but people were asking what happens if I eat within my calorie goals, but not within my macro goals? Like if they're eating more fat than they're supposed to be than carbs or something like that.
Yeah. I saw this question and it's a great question too. I guess it depends on how you're viewing it. Like when people think like I'll start with the misconception. Some people think that carbs are going to be what causes fat, or like certain things like fat is what causes fat. But actually overconsumption of any of those macronutrients would be the cause of, let's say, weight gain. But when it comes to if you're eating within those goals and you're, say, having, like this one says, more carbs and more fats, that's actually very normal. Typically, the general recommendations for carbs, fat, and protein are 50% of our calories come from carbs, 20% come from protein, and about 30% come from fat. So when we're looking at this question, it's totally normal to have more fat and carbs than we do protein. But maybe the question that they're asking too is that what happens if I'm under eating on protein, or I'm just getting so much more carbs and fat and I feel like I actually need more protein. A sign of that, I think, would maybe be feeling like you're still hungry after a meal, or maybe, like, that's one thing I fall into too. I have a primarily vegetarian diet and I eat some meats, and I notice that I'll be hungry all the time. And so when I notice that I'm craving carbohydrates a lot more and I just ate, I'll kind of think back and be like, did I have protein in that meal? And whether that's vegetarian protein or animal-based protein, doesn't matter. We definitely do need that to keep us full and satisfied. And so that's the biggest thing.
Let's hit one more. And this is a big one because it's actually something that I've had to refer people away from me for, and I hear about it all the time. And we got a lot of people asking about it. So just any tips around PCOS when it comes to nutrition?
Yeah. PCOS is such a hot topic. I think it's a lot more common than we once thought it was. And women with PCOS, about 80-90% of the time, have some sort of insulin resistance. So when I think of nutrition guidelines for PCOS, I'm thinking kind of similar to what you would recommend for someone with diabetes, is how can we manage your blood sugars and keep them steady throughout the day so we lower the amount of, like, the hyperinsulinemia and other things that come with PCOS. So we can reduce symptoms of PCOS by managing blood sugars. So one tip I have for kind of managing blood sugars, and also the glycemic index, because even the glycemic index is a little bit flawed in that we don't exactly know how every individual food is going to interact with every individual person, because it is different. But one thing to consider is if you're having something like a banana or whole wheat crackers that may be a little bit higher in glycemic index, pairing it with protein or fat at the meal or snack that you're having it can help slow the rise of blood sugar, which can help in turn manage symptoms long-term if you're consistently doing this. So that's the biggest thing that I would recommend, is kind of following similar guidelines to someone with diabetes. It doesn't have to be rigid or crazy or anything like that. Just having balance at each meal of carbs, fat, protein is the biggest thing. The other part to consider is that some individuals with PCOS have higher inflammatory markers. And so there's a little research out there that's all about how dairy and gluten can impact those markers. So some people do better with no dairy or less dairy, or same thing with gluten. But sometimes I shy away from recommending that because, again, we all know that some people would take it to the extreme. And it's not that any of those things are super negative or super bad, but if you're finding that you're doing the carbohydrate counting, or you're balancing out your blood sugars, doing other things, and that's still not helping your symptoms, then you can try something a little more drastic, like cutting out dairy and gluten and logging how it works for you.
Well, thank you so much for answering those questions, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, truly appreciate it.
All right, thank you guys so much for watching this video and clicking on it. Hi, it's literally a month later. I also forgot to mention in this video that Katie did an interview with me all about functional fitness, so you should pop over onto her channel, watch that video as well as her others. Peace. Please let me know if you have any comments in the questions below for me or Katie. Hopefully we can answer them. Hit that subscribe button and I'll see you soon. Bye.
Fight. Too many faces you only see online. Too many cases of fake